If you have a Bible, I'd love for you guys to meet me in Matthew chapter number 22. We will get there in just a second. Earlier this month, my wife and I, Erica, we were in Miami. You guys just saw a photo of all of these lead couples that are part of these church plants, these startup churches, young churches around the country. And we do an annual couples retreat. And we really look forward to that. And it was a bit of a stroll down memory lane for Erica and I this particular time, because this is an annual thing for us. We've been going for the past couple of years. This particular time, it was a stroll down memory lane for us. And I took Erica to a place called Key Biscayne where I proposed to her. And it was really cool. We hadn't been there since that happened. And it just so happened, too, that that night at dinner, a friend of mine, Brandon Watts, who is the pastor of Epiphany Brooklyn, and he was saying, hey, I would love for you guys to just kind of recall the story of how you guys met. And so I just sat back because I knew I wasn't going to tell the story. I was gonna let Erica tell the story. I'll spare you guys all the details, but we laughed. We had some significant laughs. That is a real moment right there, where we were laughing during that dinner. And I also remember that Erica and I, we remember things differently. You know, that happens with couples. You know, you remember things differently. But it got me to thinking about the evolution of love. And how in the beginning, it's very intoxicating. You know, it's very exciting. And, back in the day, the folks, they used to say things like, boy, your nose wide open. You know, some of y'all know a little bit about that, right? But in some ways, that's what it's like, you know? It's like a high, and we have, some songs maybe that we listen to that remind us of those days or remind us of those special people. And I don't know what songs you mean. I was thinking of one like Mario's "Let Me Love You." You know, that's a local Be More kid right there. Maybe a little bit more new school, Trust Fall by Pink. You know, she said, let's just jump, baby, But you want to be with that person. You want to be where they are. You envision being with them in your mind. And when it begins to evolve and it turns into a little bit more long term, your thinking slowly expands, and you move from relishing just the company and the time you spend together to actually the responsibility of what it would be like to care for this person. And we know what this is like in many areas of our lives, not just with romance, but maybe with our careers, or maybe with our entrepreneurial pursuits or dreams that are in our hearts. At some point, early on, we have the infatuation. We have all of the feels, right? But then we have to move to the investment and intentionality it takes to remain faithful beyond the feels. That's why I often say that authentic love is more than a feeling, it's actually a decision. Because every now and then, something messes up the feeling. Every now and then, you start maybe questioning, or wrestling, or, man, what would it be like maybe to disconnect from this thing? Or maybe it's a hard moment and you're like, I'm not really sure. You're not feeling the same particular way. I think I was 7 years old when I first maybe kind of had this encounter, and it wasn't with a young lady, but it was with football. And man, I just had this infatuation with playing ball, and I wanted to play ball. And I remember going out for the football team in my local park, in my local neighborhood. And when I got there, I was all excited, and I looked forward to the day. I remember it was the first Monday in August that everything would start up. And I got out there, and the practices was hard. And it wasn't like I had envisioned in my mind. And there were all of these different things that we were doing that had nothing to do. So I thought with what it meant to actually play ball. And I remember after a couple of days, I came home, and my dad saw me home at the time. I should have been at the park practicing. And he said, "Son, what happened?" I said, "Dad, I quit." Because it was too hard. There was a disconnect between what I envisioned in my mind, which was really just infatuation, versus what it really took to actually be on the team. But what happened was the love was too deep. I couldn't escape this passion. So I decided in my mind that if I wanted it, I had to accept every part of it. And I didn't know at the time, but I was coming into the understanding of what it meant to sacrifice. And I want to share just this quick thought with you. We can't love deeply without sacrifice. And sacrifice is a decision that we make in our mind. As I think about this, I think about Matthew chapter number 22. And we've talked about Matthew 22 before, and this is where Jesus is giving us the great commandment. And as we continue in this series, where it all begins, where we're talking about our mind, and we're talking about our thinking, and we're talking about how the genesis of every action is a decision first. And Jesus makes a significant statement about loving God deeply. And the context in Matthew 22 is Jesus doing what Jesus does, and people just trying Jesus. You know, they just asking him questions, they're pushing him, and they're challenging him. And this is kind of one of those scenarios here. And then there's a question that is asked of him. Well, what is the greatest commandment? And the context kind of goes a little something like this. You know how you're talking to people and you're trying to explain to them certain things, and you're trying to share, certain things, trying to give them full context. And then they're like, okay, yeah. That's cool. Just give me the bottom line. Just tell me, like, what's the one thing I need to know? And so that's kind of what happened here in this situation. Let's zoom in Matthew 22, starting in verse 34. We're in verse 37. Here we go. It says, when the Pharisees were a group of religious leaders. So when the Pharisees heard that he, Jesus, had silenced the Sadducees, another group of religious leaders, they came together. They tried to double team him and come up against him. And one of them, an expert in the law, asked a question to test him. Teacher, which command in the law is the greatest? And Jesus said to him, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. I want to read verse 37 in the Message translation. It says, love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. This is the most important, the first on the list. As we continue this series, where it all begins, and we're talking about the mind, the question today that I want us to drill down on is, do you love God with your mind? Do you love God with your mind? I think the most interesting part of Jesus' statement here, when he's drilling down on, hey, what is the most important commandment, is loving God with all of your mind. I mean, we get the heart and the soul part of it. That's the passion. And that is the pursuit. That's all of the feels, right? But then he throws this addendum on to the statement with loving God with your mind. But what does it mean to love God with your mind? What does it mean to have this kind of loving mindset? Well, it has to do with our cognition or our thinking, the focus of our thoughts. Because, check this out, what we love is at the forefront of our thoughts, right? It influences our actions. It influences what we do. I was having this conversation with my wife the other day, and she kind of has this tendency where she just gets going in the day and she forgets to eat. I'm like, baby, I never forget to eat. I mean, as a matter of fact, I kind of strategize my whole day around like when I'm going to eat and what I am going to eat. Because a brother ain't going to go hungry. Like, trust me, if I know I'm rolling somewhere for a minute, I got snacks. Or a snack, or I know how to get a snack. Like, that's just, and then she teased me and said, yeah, because the God is in your stomach. I'm like, oh, okay, now you want to quote scripture on me. Okay. But here's the point. The point is, what is important to us, what we love, is at the forefront of our mind. To love God with our minds means that our thoughts are, and our mind is directed towards Him. Last week's message, although we were not here, we recorded a message and we posted it online. So if you missed it, you can go back and check it out. But last week we focused on Isaiah 26:3. And that verse says that God will keep our minds in perfect peace if it stayed on Him. So this is an if-then statement. If our mind is stayed on Him, then we can get peace. Like, that is the benefit. And so as I was thinking about like loving God with our minds this week, I thought about this, how there's a small but a significant thing between our thoughts and our actions, and it's our decisions. We have a thought, it leads to an action, but in the middle, there has to be a decision. It's this idea that the decision is, I have zeroed in on what I'm going to do, and I've eliminated all of the other options. And I'm going to move forward in this particular way. 2 points, and I'm going to be out of your way. Number one, as we think about this idea of what it means to love God with our mind, this idea of decisions is significantly important. Decisions determine our path, or they determine our course in life. When we look at our lives and we look at where we are right now, and we look at the place that we're in, and we look at the things that we've accomplished and all the things that have happened, it is due in large part not to our thoughts, but to our decisions. We had thoughts, we made decisions, and then our actions came after it. This is how this is how the sequence works. Whatever influences our thoughts also influences our decisions. Whatever influences our decisions determines our path. You know who gets that more than anything? People in marketing. They understand that. They get that. They understand that if I can just get this thing on your mind, if I can just turn your attention in my direction and keep it long enough, I can get you to at least consider. And if I get you to at least consider, I can get you to maybe make a decision. And if I can get you to make a decision, then I can at least maybe get you to possibly be a long-term customer. And this is how this works. We're all familiar with this. You go to a site and you're looking at something, and then like 30 seconds later, an ad pop up. You're like, wait, hold, like, how you know I'm looking at? Oh, you say something, and like, your phones and all, it's always listening. That's why I don't have Alexa in my house. She can't be in my house. It's always listening, right? Just ads, just popping up. This is how these email campaigns and these drip campaigns, like this is how it works. And the goal is is to increase our engagement through clicks, then sales, then you become a customer, I love this guy named Seth Godin. I don't know if you guys know Seth Godin. Really, really smart guy. He writes a lot about marketing, and so I heard him speak one time, and he said that some of the best companies, they really understand how to create culture is what they're trying to do. And they're trying to pull you into their culture. And I love what he said about Apple. He said, what all Apple has done is created a culture of cool and inclusion. They don't have the best technology. And all of the like real tech people in the house, like they know, y'all know that. Like, right. They don't have the best technology, but they've created this mindset that you are less cool if you don't have an iPhone. Now, listen, before you start saying like, nah, I ain't like that, the moment somebody is in your group chat and it ain't blue, you're like, oh, Lord, it done messed up the group chat. You got group me? They put it in something else. Boy, we don't like it when somebody in there and they ain't. Listen, all the droid people like, that's a fact. But that's what Seth Godin said. Like, that's what they've done. They've created a mindset that, hey, to have this technology is to be a part of the cool kids. And subconsciously, we have adopted it in a lot of ways. Because biologically, our physical brains have these things called neurological pathways. And so when we make decisions, we are creating pathways in our brain. And the more we make that decision, it's kind of like a dirt road becoming a 4-lane highway. Because we made the decision, and the traffic on that highway increases. And these neurological pathways are cemented in our mind. This means that our thoughts are influenced by what we are constantly and regularly exposed to, and it is shaping our physical brain. So what we decide to do is the result of what we're watching, what we're listening, who and what we're spending time with. Back to what Jesus said in Matthew 22. He's basically saying a mind that loves God is influenced by him. A mind that loves God is influenced by him. Do you know that when Jesus began his public ministry, you can go to Matthew chapter 5 and you can see it's called the Beatitudes, and then there's the Sermon on the Mount. Like, literally from the very beginning, Jesus is doing a reorientation of the mind. He's saying, oh, you think this is what it means to be blessed? No, actually, this is what it means to be blessed. No, you actually think that this is what it means to love? No, actually, this is what it means to love. He is challenging their thinking around what it means to actually love God. Loving your enemies, having humility, blessing those who curse you. Hey, man, listen, those ain't good feels right there at all. That's a shift of a mindset of an earthly kingdom to a mindset of a heavenly kingdom. This is not the mindset of the world that we live in. It's a sacrifice to live this way, because I don't feel like loving you at times. I don't feel like blessing you. I don't even want to say hi to you on certain days. Please do not walk this way. Oh, I'm trying to preach. But here's the thing. You can't sacrifice on that level without a deep love and passion for God. You just can't do it. Listen, the love and the passion that you have for God has to be greater than what you're experiencing and what you want to react to. It's this decision that I'm making in my mind that says, despite how I feel, despite how hard this is, because I love God, I'm going to hug you today. I'm going to say hello to you today. And as I'm walking off, I'm praying the Lord just helps me and keeps me. It's a decision to love God with our minds. And as a result of doing that, we are empowered by the Holy Spirit to continue to do that because we can't do it in our own strength. So the whole point is loving God with our minds is really tied to our decisions. So let's examine the decisions that we're making, and are they in line with what God would have for us to do? Second thing I want to just point out here is this idea of digestion, right? Digestion is related to our health. The output, the things that we see, is influenced by input. And health is the result of inputs. We are only as healthy as our consumption and our digestion. That's in our minds as well. So it's not just like physical food, but it's also the things that we are taking into our mind and into our space that determines our health as well. We've been talking a lot about mental health, and we have a lot of a little bit more awareness of mental and emotional health, but I'm not sure we're fully cognizant and understanding the significance of this. Dr. Carolyn Leaf, who I quoted last week, I've got another quote from her this week. She says, more and more research is showing how many diseases are lifestyle related, which includes what we think about. So what we choose to do or not do can have an important consequence for our mental and physical well-being. That's from a book called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Jesus is consistently coaching about the focus of our thoughts and our attention. Jesus also consistently retreated to pray and be with the Father because that helped him refocus. We have to learn how to disengage in order to get our focus, and this is what we see Jesus doing regularly. If you go back and you reread through the Gospels, a lot of what Jesus is talking about is how we think. Our mindset being set on heavenly things and not earthly things, which is why he said, listen, don't even worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, where you're going to wear, where you're going to go. That's like our everyday life. And listen, we're more anxious, we're more stressed, and we're more burned out because our cognitive consumption is poor. And you know what a lot of our cognitive consumption or our thinking is connected to? Comparing ourselves to other people. Comparing ourselves to what someone else is doing. We're taking our cue for how we live and how well we're doing by looking at someone else whose life is just as jacked up. They just ain't showing you that. That video that you love that looks so awesome, they recorded 50 times before they got the right angle. Loving God with our minds is reading his word, is fasting, is praying, is meditating. And I'm not talking about empty routines. I'm talking about intimate relationship. Don't you think that my wife would know that if like I just got some stuff on the list that I'm just checking off and I'm not really like trying to be with her? Don't you think God would know, like you're just checking the box that I read and I did this? No, it's about intimacy. There's a theologian, Craig Keener, and he talks about how in the Hebrew Bible, they talked about knowing God. And he says to know God is about intimate knowledge of God. It's about right relationship and intimacy. Right relationship is about doing the right things. Intimacy is completely different. That's on a completely different level. That's a different level of knowing. Because listen, you can still do the right things and be disengaged. And he said the only way to have intimacy with God is to be in communion with him, with our minds and our bodies and our souls, where it really reflects, what we do reflects genuine devotion and allegiance. You can have religion and knowledge and not have transformation. Because all that does, if you have religion and you have knowledge, but you have no transformation, he says all you're doing is reorganizing your flesh. And you're just being a little less harmful. But there's no real transformation. In other words, it's like engaging in healthy activities, but you're not really transformed. Like you eat a salad every now and then. You eat a smoothie or drink a smoothie ever so often, but you're not fully transformed in your mind. So Jesus said, love God with all your heart, soul, and your mind. It's a full commitment. Our thinking is significantly important. Let me see if I can land the plane for us like this. Man, I'm currently reading this book, and for this series, I've been reading like 3 or 4 books at the same time, which is kind of atypical for how I roll. I'm like a one book at a time person, but I've been going back and forth between these books, and currently one of the books is called Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke. And it's a fascinating and heartbreaking book at the same time because she's talking about overconsumption of dopamine stimuli. And I'm going to break that down in just a second. Dopamine is produced in our brain, and it's known as the feel-good hormone. We have a reward system in our nervous system. It's connected to our brain, and it causes our brain to release this hormone when we experience pleasure or when we're pursuing pleasure as well. And here's what Lemke said. She said, our smartphones, these things right here, she said, that is the modern day hypodermic needle, giving us 24/7 digital dopamine. Now, here's the thing. Like, I think everybody in this room probably feeling convicted right now. I get it. let me just give you some stats, because who's being impacted is the younger generation, but we're all feeling it. When we look at Gen Z gaming, 80 hours per week on average. Gen Z is like age 12 to 27. All right. The younger part of Gen Z, the teenagers, 98 hours per week. That's like 11 to 14 hours a day. That's like more than a full-time job. And then we check our phones on average 262 times a day. That's like about every 5 minutes. For some of us, it's definitely more than that. Average Netflix user, 3.2 hours per day. When you add that up, that's like almost a full day, almost a full 24 hours in a week. Now, listen, I'm not sharing this because I'm trying to make us feel convicted. I'm not sharing this because I don't even have some challenges with the amount of time that I give to technology. It's a challenge for all of us. I'm trying to make a clear point about what we're giving our minds to. And let me just continue this point even further. We do all of this mostly for entertainment and amusement. Now, there's nothing wrong with a little fun, nothing wrong with a little amusement. You know, our brain needs a break from processing. And so this is helpful. The problem is that we're hooked on entertainment and amusement. That's the problem. And these phones are literally designed to hook us, and they're designed to distract us, and they're designed to keep our attention. Now, let me just break down the word amusement. It comes from the root word amuse. The prefix a means not. The word muse means think. So it's designed to make us not think. That's what amusement means. And these things and the technology has been created to disrupt our thinking. Now, this is also an incredible tool. It also has a lot of value to us. So it's not that the tool is necessarily bad. It's that some of the people who have designed the tool and the things that they've connected with the tool is not necessarily good. Let me take it a step further. C.S. Lewis, who I love, if you haven't read any of C.S. Lewis's work, there's one in particular that I love called Screw Tape Letters. And this book is it's a fascinating fable about a senior demon who's trying to coach a younger demon on how to influence the human subject. And so he's writing these letters to really coach this younger demon on how to influence the subject that he's been assigned to. And I love what he says. He says, all they need is pleasure and amusement. You can make humans do nothing at all for long periods. And then he says to the younger demon, he says, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember, the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate man from God. So it's not spectacular. It's just, let me just distract a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And it grows and grows and grows. You ever been so engaged in something you looked up and it's been 90 minutes, but it felt like 5? The reason we titled this series Where It All Begins is because the battle is in our mind. The battle is our thinking. The battle is what we give our attention to. We will reflect whatever our heart and our minds consumes most. Even Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father do. I don't do what I do on my own accord. I'm influenced by who I give my attention to, who is my Father. The question that I have for us today is, who or what has our mind? And the answer is whatever we're giving it to regularly. And so to love God with our heart, soul, and mind, particularly the mind, is where our thinking is regularly aligned. And it's important for us in the culture that we live in today to understand that there are things designed literally to capture our minds. And we have to be diligent about what we give our minds to. Because it is the source of every action that we do every single day. Let's pray.